Hey everyone, thanks for joining the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really foundational text, one that seriously challenged how we think about the brain. It's K.S. Lashley's 1930 paper, Cerebral Mechanisms in Behavior, a critique of localization. Our mission today is really to unpack why this work, almost a century old now, still feels pretty radical.
It really was radical for its time. Lashley, well, he was looking at the neurological explanations of behavior back then, and he was struck by what he called their futility. A lot seemed based on, assumptions rather than direct physiological evidence.
Assumptions like what, exactly? What was the dominant view he was pushing back against?
Well, the main ideas were, first, that specific behaviors, even complex ones, were strictly pinned down to tiny little spots in the brain. And second, this sort of telephone system modeled the brain as just a network of fixed wires, simple reflex arcs connecting stimulus and response. Like a switchboard, basically.
Okay, a very mechanical view. So Lashley wasn't buying it.
Not at all. He found it just wasn't adding up when you look closely at experimental results in clinical cases. And he brought evidence to the table, right? Not just criticism.
Oh, absolutely. Compelling evidence. He really focused on showing that functions weren't rigidly tied to specific cells or tiny areas.
So what were some of his key arguments there?
There are two really elegant ones he highlighted. First, stimulus equivalence. So he did these experiments training rats on visual patterns. He found they could still recognize the pattern even when completely different parts of their retina were stimulated.
So it wasn't about which specific cells fired?
Exactly. It wasn't about fixed cell A. Firing equals recognition. The brain seemed to be grasping the pattern, the ratios, the proportions, like recognizing a melody regardless of the key it's played in.
Okay, that makes sense. Understanding the whole, not just the individual inputs. What was the second one?
That was reaction equivalence. Think about maze running again. Lashley observed that the rats didn't use the exact same sequence of muscle movements every single time they ran the maze correctly. The goal was achieved, but the means were flexible.
Like how I can write my name with my right hand or my left, or even hold the pen in my teeth, maybe. The result is my signature, but the muscle commands are totally different.
Precisely. Or think about human language. We generate novel sentences constantly, using words in endless combinations. We don't have like a specific pre-wired brain circuit for every single sentence we might ever say.
Right, that would be impossible. So it's the underlying ability or habit that matters, not the specific physical execution.
That's the core idea. It pointed towards this surprising adaptability, this plasticity within the nervous system. Functions seemed much more independent of specific structures than previously thought.
Which really blows up the fixed wiring diagram idea.
Yeah.
How did this relate to brain injury and recovery?
This is where his concept of mass action comes in, and it's fascinating. He looked at studies of brain lesions. He found that things like memory loss, amnesia, weren't necessarily linked to where the damage was in the cortex, but rather to how much tissue was damaged.
Wait, so the location didn't matter as much as the sheer size of the injury?
For certain functions, especially complex learning like maze navigation, yes. Learning ability, memory retention, they seem to be related to the total mass of tissue available, not tied to specific cells being intact.
Wow. So the brain could compensate using other areas if one part was damaged?
It suggested something like that, yeah. Equipotentiality, the idea that other parts could potentially take over. He also cited things like salamander limb grafts, where one nerve could somehow coordinate various different movements, or rats maintaining coordination despite spinal cord cuts. It all pointed away from rigid point-to-point connections.
Okay, so the brain isn't just fixed wires, and it's not just about location, location, location. What about the idea of it being just an input-output machine? Did he challenge that too?
He did. He went after the circular reflex idea, the notion that brain activity always needed immediate input or feedback from the body or the outside world.
Like the brain couldn't think for itself, it always had to be reacting.
Sort of. But Lashley's experiments, for instance, on motor cortex excitability, suggested what he called a centrally maintained attitude. The brain could hold a state, an intention, internally, without constant peripheral reinforcement.
So it could sustain activity on its own.
Yes. And even more strikingly, he found rats could run through complex, learned maze sequences, even when he tried to eliminate external cues and internal sensory feedback from their own bodies. This pointed to continued intraneural processes, stuff happening purely within the brain, driving the behavior.
That paints a picture of a much more active, dynamic brain. So how did Lashley try to put this all together? What was his alternative framework?
Well, he didn't deny specialization entirely. He acknowledged areas like the visual cortex are highly specialized. But for other functions, like that maze learning, he saw the cortex acting more holistically. He talked about functions operating at different functional levels of organization.
Functional levels, what does that mean?
Think about it like this. Maybe a brain injury doesn't knock out a single basic ability, like recognizing a letter. Instead, it might limit the complexity of the tasks you can handle. He used the example of aphasic patients. They might understand simple commands, but struggle with complex, multi-step instructions. The injury affects a higher level of organization needed for complexity.
Got it. So the brain provides a kind of generalized framework, a flexible space, rather than rigidly defined slots for everything.
That's a good way to put it. A framework where specific actions or reactions can spontaneously fit in adaptively.
And maybe the most amazing part is how orderly behavior often remains.
It can actually reaggregate and form a whole new organized sponge.
He suggested the nervous system has this inherent, coherent logical character, this internal drive towards organization that allows it to adapt and function despite anatomical disruption. It can sort of find new solutions.
So looking back at Lashley's 1930 critique, it really did force a massive shift, didn't it? Away from rigid localization and wiring towards plasticity, mass action, and this incredible adaptability.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with a really important question even today. If memory isn't just in one spot, if it's a property of the total mass, and if the brain operates within this self-regulating relational framework,
Yeah.
well, what does that century-old insight really mean for how we approach learning, memory, rehabilitation after brain injury now? It's a strong push to look beyond overly simplistic models.
A reminder of the brain's sheer complexity and resilience. We hope this deep dive has given you a clearer picture of this truly foundational work and its lasting impact.